Millionaire walks away from deal with investors, but his housekeeper changes the company's fate. William Harrison Parker's hands trembled as he tore the contracts to shreds right in front of the foreign investors. The 15th floor meeting room fell into absolute silence as the papers fluttered like confetti onto the polished mahogany table. 40 years building the most respected textile empire in the heart of Chicago, and now it was all crumbling like a house of cards. "The meeting is over," William said, his voice choked, rising from his chair and heading toward the door. "My company is no longer for sale." The three foreign executives exchanged incredulous glances. The German Dieter Hoffmann was the first to speak, his English thick with an accent. "Mr. Parker, you're making a grave mistake. Our offer is far too generous to be dismissed like this." "Generous?" William turned, his eyes red from years of accumulated hardship. "You want to buy 50 years of my life for a price that barely covers the debts, and on top of that, fire 300 employees who've trusted me all along." The French executive, Sylvie Renault, adjusted her glasses and opened a folder full of documents. "Mr. Parker, we understand the sentimental value, but numbers don't lie. Your company is on the verge of bankruptcy. This deal is the only way to salvage what can still be saved." "Salvage?" William let out a bitter laugh. "You only want the brand and the facilities. The employees who dedicated their lives here will be tossed out like disposable trash." At that moment, the door opened silently, and Margaret Johnson walked in carrying a tray of coffee. Her steps were careful on the grey carpet, just as they had been for the 28 years she'd worked for the Parker family. She wore her impeccable grey uniform with white trim, her hair pinned in a perfect bun. William didn't even notice her presence, continuing his heated argument with the investors. But Margaret observed every gesture, every word, every glance exchanged in that room. It wasn't the first time she'd witnessed important meetings, but this time, something was different. The boss she'd known since his younger days looked like a defeated man. "My employees aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet," William went on, his voice rising. "They're people with families, dreams, children to raise. Do you think I'd betray their trust just to save my own skin?" The third investor, a middle-aged American named Michael Anderson, tapped the table lightly. "Mr. Parker, be rational. If you don't accept our offer, your company will shut down in 6 months anyway. And then neither the employees nor you will be left standing. At least this way, some jobs will be preserved." Margaret nearly dropped the tray when she heard those words. 6 months until closure. The situation was even worse than she'd imagined. She began serving the coffee, trying to go unnoticed, but her ears caught every detail of the conversation. "Some jobs?" William laughed sarcastically. "You yourselves said you'd only keep 80 employees. That means 220 people will lose their jobs. People I know by name, whose families, struggles, and dreams I know." "That's the price of progress, monsieur," Sylvie said coldly. "The textile market has changed. Asian competition has made it impossible to maintain outdated structures like yours." Margaret paused in serving the coffee for a moment. Outdated structures? She knew every corner of that company, from the early days when William was just a young dreamer who'd inherited a small weaving business from his father. She'd seen him work 16-hour days, sleep in the office, even sell his own car to pay wages during tough times. "Outdated," William snapped. "My company has employed entire families for generations. Walter from maintenance has worked here for 35 years. Mrs. Betty from the sewing department raised her children on the wages she earned here. That's not old-fashioned. That's commitment to people." Dieter sighed heavily and opened his briefcase. "Mr. Parker, we understand the emotional aspect, but let's focus on the facts. Your company has a debt of $12 million. The banks are demanding payment. Your suppliers are cutting off credit. How long do you think it will take to turn this situation around?" The silence that followed was deafening. William lowered his gaze, his hands resting on the table. Margaret could see he knew the answer but didn't want to admit it. "I don't know," William murmured after a long pause. "But I do know I won't abandon the people who trusted me." "So you'd rather see everyone lose everything than accept that some can be saved?" Michael asked sharply. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Margaret's heart raced as she watched William bow his head. She knew him too well not to realize he was about to give in. The pressure was too much for him to bear alone. But there was something these foreigners didn't know, something only she, who had cleaned every drawer, organized every document, overheard every phone call over the years, could reveal. "You're right," William finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe it's better to save some jobs than lose them all." "Now you're thinking sensibly," Sylvie said, reopening the contracts. "We can revise the documents and—" "Excuse me," a firm voice interrupted. Everyone turned to look at Margaret, who had set the tray on the sideboard and now stood beside the meeting table. William stared at her in surprise. In nearly 3 decades together, she had never interfered in a business meeting. "Margaret, could you step out, please?" William said gently. "We're in an important meeting." "I know, Mr. William, and that's exactly why I need to speak." The investors exchanged incredulous glances. A housekeeper wanting to weigh in on a multi-million-dollar negotiation? Dieter opened his mouth to protest, but Margaret continued before he could speak. "You're making a very big mistake," she said, looking directly at the 3 foreigners. "And Mr. William is making one too, but for different reasons." "Margaret, please," William tried, clearly embarrassed. "No, Mr. William. You've always told me this home and this company were like family. And in a family, when someone is about to make a foolish mistake, the others have a duty to step in." Michael stood impatiently. "Mr. Parker, I think it would be best to continue this conversation without interference." "I'm the interference?" Margaret took a few steps toward the table, her chin raised in a show of courage that stunned everyone. "Then let me ask you a question, doctors. Do you know what truly makes this company valuable?" "Ma'am, please," Sylvie began. "Answer," Margaret insisted. "You've studied the numbers, analyzed the machinery, calculated the costs. But do you know what makes this company worth more than any spreadsheet can show?" Dieter rolled his eyes. "Listen, we're serious professionals. We didn't come here to hear sentimental stories about—" "Sentimental stories?" Margaret laughed, but there was no humor in her voice. "Gentlemen, you're about to spend $25 million on a company you think you understand. But they don't even know 10% of what she's really worth." William was looking at Margaret as if seeing her for the first time. There was something in her tone, a firmness he'd never witnessed before. "Margaret, what are you trying to say?" "I'm trying to say you're being too humble, Mr. William, and these gentlemen are being too greedy. Now listen here." Michael raised his voice. "We won't tolerate insults from a—" "From a what?" Margaret stared him down. "Go ahead, say it. From a housekeeper? From a simple person? Is that what you meant?" The room filled with discomfort. Michael swallowed hard, realizing he'd stepped onto dangerous ground. "That's not what I was going to say," he muttered. "Yes, it was," Margaret countered. "And you know what? You're right. I am just a housekeeper, a simple person who mops floors, washes dishes, irons clothes. But do you know the difference between me and you?" The 3 investors remained silent, clearly uneasy. "The difference is I truly know this company. I know things even Mr. William has forgotten. I saw this company born, grow, face crises and rise again. You've only seen numbers on a report." William sat down slowly, beginning to understand Margaret had something important to say. "Go on, Margaret." "Mr. William, do you remember 1996, when that fire nearly destroyed the main warehouse?" "Of course I remember. It was one of the company's worst moments." "And do you remember how you rebuilt everything in 3 months?" William paused, trying to recall details from that turbulent time. "It was the employees," he said slowly. "They worked weekends voluntarily. Some even donated money for the rebuild." "Exactly," Margaret confirmed. "And do you know why they did that? Because this isn't just a company to them. It's where they built their lives, raised their children, fulfilled their dreams." Sylvie adjusted her glasses, starting to pay attention to Margaret's words. "And what's your point with this story?" My point is, you want to buy a company, but what makes this company special can't be bought. It's the loyalty, the commitment, the love people have for this place. Feelings don't pay bills, Dieter said pragmatically. No, Margaret smiled for the first time since she began speaking. Then explain something to me. If this company is in such bad shape as you claim, why are suppliers still extending credit? Why haven't banks called in the debts? Why do employees keep working despite delayed paychecks? The three investors exchanged glances, with no immediate answers. I'll tell you why, Margaret continued. It's because everyone who does business with this company knows it always honors its commitments. Mr. William may be struggling now, but his word is worth more than any bank guarantee. William felt his eyes moisten. It was true, even in the worst crises, he'd always found a way to keep his word, even at great personal cost. Ma'am, Michael tried to interrupt. I'm not finished, Margaret said firmly. You want to know why your offer is an insult? Because you're offering money for machines and facilities, but you want the most valuable thing this company has for free, its reputation. The company's reputation comes with the purchase, Sylvie said. Obviously. Does it? Then tell me this. When you buy the company and lay off 220 employees, do you think the remaining 80 will keep working with the same dedication? Do you think suppliers will keep trusting you? Do you think the clients will stay loyal? The silence that followed was telling. The investors hadn't considered that aspect of the issue. This company's reputation is directly tied to how it treats people, explained Margaret. Destroy that, and all you'll have bought is scrap metal and empty walls. William was completely mesmerized by Margaret's words. In all the years he'd known her, he'd never imagined she had such a clear understanding of business. Margaret, how do you know all these things? Mr. William, I'm not invisible. All these years I've listened to your phone calls, read your reports while organizing your desk, sat in on your meetings. You all talk as if housekeepers were furniture, unable to see or hear anything. Dieter shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Even if that's true, it still doesn't solve the company's financial problem. Oh, but it does, Margaret said with a mysterious smile, because you don't know everything. What are you talking about? William asked, intrigued. Mr. William, do you remember that project you developed 2 years ago? That synthetic fiber system that mimics natural silk? William's eyes widened. The Phoenix project? But that never left the drawing board. We couldn't secure funding for the research. You couldn't because you gave up too quickly, Margaret said. But I kept all the documents, all the research, all the prototypes, all the lab contacts. The investors leaned forward, interested. And why did you keep all that? William asked. Because I saw the spark in your eyes when you talked about that project. I knew it would matter someday. What kind of project is this? Richard asked. His business interest piqued. It's a revolutionary process, William explained, his voice regaining enthusiasm. A way to produce synthetic fibers with the same quality and appearance as natural silk, but at a much lower cost. If true, this could be worth a fortune, Sylvie murmured. It is true, Margaret confirmed, and I can prove it. She walked to the shelf where William kept some personal documents and pulled out a yellowed folder. Mr. William, do you remember receiving a letter from Midwestern State University 3 months ago? I don't recall any important letter. Well, you should. They wanted to propose a partnership to develop exactly this kind of research. The letter was addressed to you, but it arrived while you were traveling. I left it on your desk, but with all the debt worries, you must have forgotten to read it. William took the letter Margaret handed him and began reading. His eyes grew wider by the second. They're offering a development partnership, university labs, federal funding. Well, how did I miss this? Because you were so focused on solving today's problems that you forgot to look at tomorrow's opportunities, Margaret said gently. Dieter stood and began pacing the room. If this project really works, we're talking about a complete shift in the negotiation landscape. That's why I said you don't know this company's true value, Margaret said. You only saw the debts and the problems. You didn't see the potential. Richard took the letter from William's hands and skimmed it quickly. The university's proposal is serious. They have labs, resources, international connections. With the right project, this could revolutionize the textile industry. But why didn't you show me this letter sooner? William asked Margaret. Because you weren't in a place to see opportunities, you were only focused on the problems. I was waiting for the right moment. And do you think this is the right moment? I think this is the moment for you to choose between giving up or fighting, between selling your story for a low price or investing in the future. Sylvie stood up and began pacing the room, clearly reassessing the entire situation. If this project really works, the company doesn't need to be sold. It needs investment for expansion. Exactly, said Margaret. But not just any investment. Investment from people who understand the real value of this company. And you think we don't understand? Asked Dieter. I think you came here like vultures, waiting to buy the scraps of something you thought was dead. But this company isn't dead. It's just going through a rough patch. William got up and walked to the window, looking out at the factory yard where dozens of employees worked, unaware of the meeting deciding their fates. Margaret is right, he finally said. I was ready to give up because I only thought about the immediate problems. I didn't look at the possibilities. Mr. William, Margaret said, stepping closer to him, do you remember what your mother, Mrs. Eleanor, always said? William smiled for the first time in the meeting. Problems exist to be solved, not to defeat us. Exactly. And Mrs. Eleanor didn't raise a son who gives up at the first sign of trouble. The three investors huddled in a corner of the room, speaking in low voices. It was clear the revelation of the Phoenix project had completely changed their calculations. Do you need some time to talk? William asked. Actually, said Michael, returning to the table, we need to rethink this entire situation. If the project you mentioned really has potential, perhaps we should consider a partnership instead of a purchase. Partnership. William's interest was piqued. We provide capital to develop the project and settle the immediate debts. You retain control of the company and the employees keep their jobs. We split the future profits. Margaret crossed her arms, still skeptical. And what guarantees do we have that you won't try to take control later? We can structure the agreement so Mr. Parker always keeps the majority of shares, Sylvie explained. Our interest is solely in the financial return on the investment. That sounds better, William admitted, but I want guarantees that no employee will be laid off. On the contrary, said Dieter, if the project succeeds, we'll need to hire more people. William looked at Margaret, who gave a slight nod. I need time to think about this, William said. It's a big change from what we were discussing. Of course, Michael agreed. But we can't wait too long. Our offer has a deadline. How much time? William asked. 1 week, Sylvie said. We need an answer in a week. When the investors left, William stayed in the room alone with Margaret. He sat in his chair, still processing everything that had happened. Margaret, I don't know how to thank you for what you did here today. There's no need to thank me, Mr. William. I just told the truth. But how did you know so much? How do you understand business so well? Margaret smiled and sat in the chair across from him, something she'd never done in nearly 3 decades of working there. Mr. William, all these years working here, I've had the best business school anyone could ask for. I watched you make decisions, solve problems, handle crises. I learned by observing. But you showed very specific knowledge about finances, the market, because I took an interest. In my free time, I read the business newspapers you threw away. I watched financial programs on TV. I was trying to understand what was happening in the company where I spent most of my days. William looked at her with renewed admiration. You are an extraordinary woman, Margaret. How could I have been so blind all these years? You weren't blind, you were busy building an empire, but now you need to decide what to do with it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the days that followed, William couldn't get their conversation out of his head. He had begun to see Margaret in a new light, no longer just as the dedicated housekeeper he had known for decades, but as a wise advisor who understood aspects of the business he himself had neglected. The next morning, William arrived at the office earlier than usual and found Margaret organizing his documents as she always did. Margaret, may I ask you something? Of course, Mr. William. Why did you never tell me you had an interest in business? Why didn't you ask to work in another department of the company? Margaret stopped what she was doing and looked at him directly. Because I knew my place, Mr. William. And I don't say that with bitterness. I've always enjoyed my work. Taking care of your home, your family, it's always been important to me. But that doesn't mean I couldn't learn other things too. Do you have family, Margaret? Children? All these years I realize I know very little about your personal life. I have a daughter, Mr. William, Jennifer. She's 25 and has a degree in business administration. William was surprised. Business administration? Where does she work? At a consulting firm in downtown Chicago. She always wanted to work in business. I encouraged her, even though it was hard to pay for college on my salary. Margaret, I didn't know. I'm sorry I never asked. There's no need to apologize. Employers usually don't ask about their employees' lives. It's normal. But it shouldn't be, William said, genuinely regretful. You've worked here for nearly 30 years. You're part of this family. I should know these things. Margaret smiled gently. You're learning now, that's what matters. William grew thoughtful for a moment, then had an idea. Margaret, you said your daughter has a degree in business administration. Yes, why? I'd like to meet her. Maybe she could help us analyze this investor proposal, a fresh, outside perspective. Mr. William, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Jennifer is very young. She doesn't have experience with companies of this size. But she has up-to-date academic training, and if she's your daughter, she must have the same intelligence and good judgment you showed yesterday. Margaret was moved by the trust William was placing in her and her family. If you think she could be helpful, I can ask her to come by. Wonderful. Schedule it for this afternoon. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Jennifer Johnson arrived at the company. She was an elegant young woman, dressed professionally, who had inherited her mother's firm posture and observant gaze. William welcomed her into his office, along with Margaret. Pleasure to meet you, Jennifer. Your mother told me you work in consulting. Yes, Mr. Parker. I work at a small firm, but I've already been involved in some financial feasibility analyses. Perfect. I'd like you to review this proposal and give me your opinion. William handed Jennifer all the documents related to the negotiation with the foreign investors. She spent over an hour analyzing every detail, taking notes in a notebook. May I be frank, Mr. Parker? She finally asked. Please do. This proposal is unfavorable to you. They're offering far too little for what they intend to gain. That's what your mother said yesterday, but they argue the company is in a very difficult situation. It really is, Jennifer confirmed. But not as bad as they're making it seem. The debts are high but manageable. The problem is the lack of immediate cash flow. And do you have any suggestions? Jennifer exchanged a glance with her mother before answering. Actually, I have a few ideas. But first, I'd like to better understand this Phoenix project that was mentioned. William spent the next hour explaining the synthetic fibers project in detail. Jennifer asked technical and financial questions that demonstrated her professional competence. This project has enormous potential, she said at the end, but it needs significant investment for development and testing. That's exactly what the foreign investors are offering, said William. Yes, but not under the right conditions. They want too much equity in exchange for the investment. In practice, it would be almost a disguised sale. So what do you suggest? A few alternatives. First, seek public funding for the project. The government has several credit lines for technological innovation. Second, try a partnership with the university, as suggested in the letter. Third, look for domestic investors who better understand the American market. Margaret watched her daughter with pride. William was impressed by the young woman's clear thinking. And what about the immediate cash flow problem? William asked. For that, I'd suggest renegotiating the debts with longer terms, selling some non-essential assets, and maybe running a receivables advance campaign with the most loyal clients. Do you really believe that would work? I think it's worth trying before handing the company over to foreigners who don't understand its true history and value. William stood up and walked to the window, thoughtful. Margaret, Jennifer, you two have completely changed my perspective on this situation. Mr. William, said Margaret, you've always been a man of vision. You just needed someone to remind you of that. You know what impresses me the most? Said William, turning to them. You two know my company better than I do. Margaret, from years of observation and dedication. Jennifer, from your competent technical analysis. I was ready to give up, but you've shown me there's still hope. The hope was always there, Mr. William, said Jennifer. It just needed to be seen. At that moment, William's secretary knocked and entered. Mr. Parker, Mr. Dieter Hoffman is on the phone. He says it's urgent. William answered on speakerphone. Dieter, how can I help you? Mr. Parker, a complication has come up. Our partners in London are pushing to speed up the negotiation. They want an answer by tomorrow, or they'll withdraw the offer. William looked at Margaret and Jennifer, who shook their heads. Dieter, a week was already a tight deadline. One day is impossible for a decision of this magnitude. I understand, but it's not our decision. It's orders from headquarters. So, should I assume you're withdrawing the proposal? Not necessarily. If you accept right now, we can proceed. Otherwise, unfortunately, we'll have to look for other investment opportunities. William took a deep breath. It was time for the final decision. Dieter, I appreciate your interest, but I must decline the offer. Mr. Parker, are you sure? This may be your last chance to save the company. I'm sure, and I don't believe it's the last chance. I believe it's just the beginning of a new phase. Very well. I regret we couldn't reach an agreement. I wish you luck in your future endeavors. When William hung up, Margaret and Jennifer were smiling. And now, Mr. William? Asked Margaret. Now we're going to fight for our company. We'll pursue the alternatives Jennifer suggested. We'll bet on the Phoenix project, and we'll prove this company is worth far more than any foreign investor imagines. Are you sure this is what you want? Asked Jennifer. Absolutely, and I want to count on both of you for help. What do you mean? Asked Margaret. Margaret, I'd like to offer you a special consultant position. You know this company better than anyone. Your experience is invaluable. And Jennifer, I'd like to hire you as a temporary financial consultant. We need someone competent to help with the restructuring. Mother and daughter exchanged emotional glances. Mr. William, I don't know what to say, murmured Margaret. Say you accept. Say we'll save this company together. I accept, said Margaret, her eyes glistening. I accept too, said Jennifer. It'll be an honor to work with you. In the following days, William, Margaret, and Jennifer worked tirelessly on the company's restructuring. The first step was contacting Midwestern State University to discuss the partnership for the Phoenix project. Professor Robert Matthews, head of the Materials Engineering Department, came to the company in person to evaluate the project. Mr. Parker, the project you've developed is truly impressive, said the professor after reviewing the documentation. With the university's resources, I believe we can have a functional prototype in 6 months. What about funding? Asked Jennifer. We've already submitted the proposal to 3 different grant agencies. The innovation potential is so great that I'm confident we'll get approval from at least one. Meanwhile, Jennifer was working on debt renegotiation. Her strategy was to meet with each creditor separately, presenting a realistic repayment plan based on the Phoenix project's revenue projections. I've renegotiated 70% of the debts, she reported in a meeting with William and Margaret. The creditors agreed to wait because they trust your reputation, Mr. William. What about the other 30%? Asked William. Those are tougher. They're larger banks, less flexible. But I have an idea. What? What if we launch a campaign among our own employees? Many have savings and could lend money to the company at lower interest rates than banks. It'd be like an internal crowdfunding. Margaret smiled. Jennifer, you're brilliant. The employees would love to participate. They trust this company as much as the company trusts them. But wouldn't it be risky for them? Asked William, concerned. It'd be a calculated risk, Jennifer explained. We'd offer solid guarantees and attractive interest. For many employees, it'd be a better investment than a savings account. The campaign was launched in a company-wide meeting. William explained the situation with complete transparency, presented the Phoenix project and asked for voluntary support. No one is obligated to participate, he emphasized, but those who choose to help will be saving not just the company, but all our jobs. The results were astonishing. Within 2 weeks, over 100 employees had signed up to lend money to the company, from small amounts of $1,000 to larger investments of $10,000. Walter from maintenance, the longest-serving employee, was one of the first to join. "Mr. William, this company has given me everything I have in life," he said emotionally. "Now it's my turn to give back." Mrs. Betty from the sewing department also participated. "I've seen this company grow from the start. I won't abandon it now when it needs me." In 3 months, the company's situation had completely transformed. The debts had been renegotiated, the Phoenix project had received approval for public funding, and the partnership with the university was working perfectly. The first prototype of the synthetic fibers was a success. The quality exceeded expectations, and the production cost was within projections. "Mr. William," said Professor Robert during a visit, "this project has the potential to revolutionize the American textile industry. We've already had inquiries from companies interested in licensing the technology." "Inquiries from where?" asked William. "Canada, Germany, Japan." The news spread in international academic circles. Ironically, Dieter Hoffmann called a few weeks later. "Mr. Parker, we heard about your groundbreaking project. Our partners would like to reconsider the proposal for a partnership." "How interesting, Dieter," William replied sarcastically. "Now that you know the real potential of the company, you want to come back to the negotiating table? The market has changed, Mr. Parker. We're prepared to make a much more generous offer." "I appreciate the interest, but we're no longer interested. Our company has found its own path." "Mr. Parker, don't be hasty. We can offer resources you don't have. Dieter, a few months ago you offered me $25 million for a company you thought was bankrupt. Today, the Phoenix project alone is worth more than that. And now we have partners who believe in our potential, not just in our desperation." When William hung up the phone, Margaret and Jennifer were smiling. "How do you feel, Mr. William?" asked Margaret. "I feel like I've regained not just my company, but also my dignity." 6 months later, Parker Textile Industries was unrecognizable. Production had increased by 50%, 20 new employees had been hired, and licensing requests for the Phoenix technology were coming in from all over the world. William decided to throw a party to celebrate the company's recovery. All employees were invited, along with their families. The party would be held in the factory courtyard, specially decorated for the occasion. "Margaret," William said the night before the party, "I want you to give a speech tomorrow." "Me, Mr. William? I don't know how to speak in public. You saved this company as much as I did. People need to know that. But the hero of this story is you. You made the brave decision not to sell. The heroes of this story are all of us, Margaret. Every employee who believed, every creditor who gave us time, every person who bet on the future instead of giving up on the present." At the party, William stepped onto the small stage set up for the occasion. All the employees and their families gathered to listen. "Friends, a year ago, our company almost died. Not for lack of ability, not for lack of dedication, but because we lost hope. Because we started to believe our time had passed." The employees listened in silence, remembering the difficult times. "But I learned an important lesson. I learned that a company isn't just made of machines and facilities. It's made of people, of stories, of shared dreams, and that is priceless." Applause echoed through the courtyard. I want to especially thank 2 people who changed the course of this story. Margaret Johnson, who taught me to look beyond the numbers, and Jennifer Johnson, who showed me that the future is still in our hands. William called mother and daughter to the stage. Margaret has worked here for nearly 30 years. All that time I saw her only as a dedicated employee, but she is so much more than that. She is the heart of this company, the living memory of our history, the guardian of our values. Margaret was visibly moved. That's why I want to announce that Margaret Johnson has been promoted to Director of Human Relations for this company. She will continue to take care of all of us, but now with the recognition she has always deserved. The audience erupted in applause. Margaret couldn't hold back her tears. And Jennifer Johnson, who proved to us that youth and competence are the perfect combination to face challenges, has been hired as our Chief Financial Officer. More enthusiastic applause followed. "Now I'd like Margaret to speak to you," said William, handing her the microphone. Margaret took a deep breath before beginning. "My friends, I've worked here since I was 20 years old. I've seen many of you arrive young, I've seen children born. I've seen families grow. To me, you're not just co-workers, you're family. Many employees began to get emotional. When the company went through hard times, I knew I couldn't stay silent, because when family is in danger, everyone has to fight together. And that's what we did, we fought together. I want to thank Mr. William for listening to me, for trusting me, for giving me the chance to show that a housekeeper also thinks, also feels, also has ideas. William was moved by Margaret's words. But most of all, I want to thank all of you, because it was you who believed in the company when it needed you most. It was you who invested your savings, your hopes, your dreams in the future we built together. The audience was completely captivated. Today we're a stronger, more united, more prosperous company. But we haven't forgotten where we came from. We haven't forgotten that our strength lies in people, not machines. And I promise that as long as I'm here, we'll continue to be a company that treats people like family. The applause was long and heartfelt. Many employees were crying with emotion. After the speeches, the celebration continued with music, dancing, and great joy. William watched from a corner, reflecting on everything that had happened. Jennifer approached him. "Mr. William, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Jennifer. Do you regret turning down the foreign investors' offer?" William smiled. "Not for a second. Those men wanted to buy a company. We saved a family. And now, what are the plans for the future? The Phoenix project is just the beginning. We have other ideas, other innovations we want to develop, and we have the right team to make it happen." "The right team?" "Yes. People like you and your mother. People who understand that success isn't just about profit. It's also about dignity, respect, and care for the people who are part of our story." Margaret joined them. "What are you two talking about?" "About the future, Mom," Jennifer replied. "The future will be bright," Margaret said with conviction. "Because now we know that when people truly come together, there's no crisis we can't overcome." William looked at the two women who had changed his life and smiled. "Margaret, can I ask you a question I should have asked long ago?" "Of course, Mr. William." "Are you happy? Working here, being part of this family?" Margaret smiled tenderly. "Mr. William, I've spent the best years of my life in this company. I've watched you grow, I've seen your children born, I've welcomed your grandchildren. I've shared in the joys and the sorrows. How could I not be happy? And now, with your new position? Now I'm even happier, because I can keep taking care of this family, but I can also contribute in a bigger way. I can use everything I've learned watching you all these years." William was moved. "Margaret, I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you've done. You saved this company. You saved hundreds of jobs. You saved my own dignity. Mr. William, I didn't save anything alone. We saved it together. You, me, Jennifer, all the employees. One person alone doesn't perform miracles. But united people do." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 6 months after the party, Parker Textile Industries had become a case study in several American universities. The story of the company that was almost sold to foreigners and saved by a housekeeper spread through specialized media. William was in his office when he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Parker, this is Richard Thompson from the Wall Street Journal. We'd like to feature your company in our special edition on humanized management." "It would be an honor, Mr. Thompson." "Perfect. And we'd also like to interview Mrs. Margaret Johnson. We heard she played a key role in the company's recovery." "Of course, I'll speak with her." When William told Margaret about the interview, she grew nervous. "Mr. William, I don't know how to give interviews. I don't speak as elegantly as a business person." "Margaret, you speak from the heart, and that's what matters." "But what will I say to an important journalist?" "The truth. Tell your story. Tell how a simple, hard-working woman saw opportunities others missed." The interview was scheduled for the following week. Journalist Richard Thompson arrived with a photographer. He was an experienced man who had covered many corporate stories, but he was genuinely interested in this unusual tale. "Mrs. Johnson, how long have you worked here?" 28 years, sir." And all this time you've always been a housekeeper? Always. I started by cleaning the Parker family home. Then I began working here at the company too, organizing Mr. Williams' office. How did you develop business knowledge? By observing, listening, learning. Mr. William has always been very dedicated. I watched him study, think, solve problems. Over time, I began to understand how a company works. And why did you decide to intervene in that meeting with the investors? Margaret thought for a moment before answering. Because I saw they didn't recognize this company's true value. They only saw numbers. They didn't see the people, the stories, the dreams built here. Weren't you afraid to interfere in such an important negotiation? I was afraid, yes, but I was more afraid of seeing this company destroyed by people who didn't understand its essence. The journalist turned to William. Mr. Parker, what was your reaction when Mrs. Johnson began speaking in that meeting? First, I was surprised. Then I was impressed. Margaret showed a business vision that made me rethink everything. And the decision to promote her? It was the best decision I've ever made in my career. Margaret knows this company better than any outside consultant. She understands the people, the culture, the values that make us unique. Mrs. Johnson, what's it like working as a director now? It's different, but it's still about caring for people. Before I took care of the home and the office, now I take care of the employees, their families, the work environment. Deep down, I'm still doing what I've always done, making sure everything runs smoothly. Do you have any advice for others in similar situations? Never settle for being invisible. Observe, learn, take an interest in what's happening around you, and when the right moment comes, have the courage to speak up. Even as a housekeeper, even as a simple person, your ideas can make a difference. After the interview, William spoke with Margaret. How did you feel? Nervous at first, but then it felt natural. It's good to tell our story. Our story will inspire many people, Margaret. I hope so. I hope others understand that no matter your position in life, you can always contribute, always make a difference. A few weeks later, the article was published and caused quite a stir. The story of Parker Textile Industries and Margaret Johnson was shared on social media, discussed on television programs, and used as an example in business courses. William began receiving invitations to speak about human-centered management. Margaret was also asked to speak at events about employee appreciation. Mr. William, I've been getting many speaking invitations, said Margaret, but I'm not sure I should accept. Why not? Because I'm not an expert in anything. I'm just someone who's worked hard all my life and learned a few things along the way. Margaret, that's exactly what makes you special. You have real, practical experience. That's worth more than any degree. Do you really think so? I'm certain of it. And besides, our story might inspire other companies to value their employees more. Margaret decided to accept some invitations. Her first talk was at a human resources conference in Chicago. She was nervous, but the reception was warm. My name is Margaret Johnson. I've worked as a housekeeper for 28 years. Today, I'm the Director of Human Relations at the same company where I've always worked, she began. The audience was immediately drawn to her straightforward, sincere approach. I'm not here to talk about theories or methodologies. I'm here to talk about people, about how important it is to see every employee as a human being, not just a number on a spreadsheet. She shared the company's story, her intervention in the meeting, the changes they implemented. The lesson our company learned is simple. When you treat people with respect and dignity, they give their best. When you show you care about them, they care about you too. At the end of her talk, she received a standing ovation. Many approached her to chat, exchange experiences, and ask for advice. One businesswoman introduced herself. Mrs. Johnson, I own a clothing company. Your story moved me deeply. I'd like to make some changes at my company based on what you shared. What kind of changes? I want to create a program to listen more to employee suggestions. I want to give growth opportunities to people who've always been underestimated. That's a wonderful idea. The best solutions often come from those who work directly with the problems every day. Another business owner approached. Mrs. Johnson, my company is going through a crisis similar to what you faced. Could you help us with some consulting? I'm still learning about consulting, sir, but I'd be happy to share our experience. Margaret began receiving consulting offers from various companies. William encouraged her to accept some, as long as it didn't interfere with her work at Parker Textile Industries. Margaret, you have valuable knowledge to share. You can help other companies avoid the mistakes we almost made. But I don't want to leave our company, Mr. William. And you won't. You can take on occasional consulting while keeping your role here as your priority. Margaret accepted a few select consulting jobs. Her approach was always the same. Get to know the company thoroughly, speak with employees at every level, and identify issues in relationships and communication. At one company, she discovered employees had many improvement ideas but were never heard by management. At another, she found high turnover was caused by a lack of recognition and growth opportunities. The problem with many companies, she said in a later interview, is that bosses become so distant from employees that they don't know what really happens day to day. They make decisions based on reports, not reality. Meanwhile, Parker Textile Industries continued to grow. The Phoenix project had been so successful that they began developing other innovations. Their partnership with the university expanded to include new research projects. Jennifer, who had initially been hired as a temporary consultant, became an integral part of the team. Her technical expertise combined with her mother's human-centered vision created a powerful duo in the company's management. "Mom, sometimes I can't believe how much our lives have changed," Jennifer said during lunch at the office. "They changed because we were brave, dear, because we refused to stand still and just watch things happen." Was Mr. William always a good boss? He was always fair and proper, but like many bosses, he didn't see employees as whole people, just the roles they filled. Now he's learned to look beyond that. And how does it feel to be seen as a whole person? I feel valued, useful in a new way. For years I knew I had ideas, but I had no space to express them. Now I do. William joined them for lunch. "What are you all talking about?" "About changes, Mr. William," Margaret replied. "Speaking of changes, I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" Jennifer asked. "I received an invitation to appear on a television program about companies that overcame crises. They want me to bring along the people who were crucial to the recovery." "You mean us?" Margaret asked. "Exactly. The program airs on Chicago's educational television channel. It would be a great opportunity to share our story with a wider audience." "I don't know, Mr. William. Television is very different from a lecture," Margaret said hesitantly. "But our story could inspire other people, other companies. It's worth trying." "If Mom goes, I'll go too," Jennifer said. "Then it's settled. We'll all go together." The program was recorded in a studio in Chicago. The host was an economics expert and had prepared questions about the company's recovery, the Phoenix project, and especially Margaret's role in the transformation. "Mr. William, how did you feel when you realized an employee understood your company better than outside consultants?" "First, I felt ashamed for being so blind for so long. Then I felt grateful to have someone who cared so much about the company that she risked her own job to save it." "Mrs. Johnson, did you really risk your job in that meeting?" "I did. I knew I could be fired for interfering in a business meeting, but I also knew if the company was sold, I'd lose my job anyway." "What motivated you to speak up?" "Love for the company and the people who work there. I couldn't stay silent and watch everything fall apart." "Jennifer, what's it like working with your mother?" "It's a unique experience. My mother has a practical wisdom you can't learn in college. She teaches me every day about the importance of seeing people before numbers." "And your plans for the future?" William answered. "We want to keep growing, but without losing our core values. We want to be a model for human-centered management, proving you can be profitable without losing your humanity." After the program, they went to dinner at a restaurant near the studio. William was thoughtful. "Margaret, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Mr. William." "Have you ever thought about writing a book telling your story?" "A book? I've never written anything in my life, Mr. William. But your story is inspiring. It could help so many people. And who would want to read the story of a housekeeper? Many people, Margaret, especially other ordinary folks who think they can't make a difference. Your story proves they can. Jennifer grew excited about the idea. Mum, it would be an interesting project. I could help with the technical part. Do you really think it would be worth it? Absolutely, said William, and I'd finance the publication. It would be a corporate social responsibility investment. Margaret was thoughtful for a moment. If it's to inspire others, to show that anyone can make a difference, then it's worth trying. In the following months, Margaret began working on the book. It was a slow process as she dictated her story to Jennifer, who helped organize the chapters and language. Mom, your story is even richer than I imagined, Jennifer said during one of their work sessions. How so? You overcame so many obstacles in life, raised a daughter alone, studied at night to understand your work better, always went above and beyond. That's truly inspiring. I just did what needed to be done. It wasn't anything extraordinary. Yes, it was, Mom. It was extraordinary because you never settled for being just what others expected of you. You always wanted to be more, learn more, contribute more. The book was published the following year under the title More Than a Housekeeper: How Courage Can Change Destinies. The signing event was held at Parker Textile Industries itself, attended by employees, clients, suppliers, and the press. Margaret, William said during the launch, this book represents much more than your personal story. It represents the possibility of transformation in every person willing to fight for their ideals. I hope people understand the message, Mr. William, that no matter their position in life, they can always make a difference. The book was well received, especially among workers from various sectors who identified with Margaret's journey. Many sent letters sharing how her story inspired them to be braver at work, suggest improvements, and fight for recognition. One letter in particular moved Margaret deeply. Mrs. Johnson, I've been a cleaner at a hospital for 15 years. I've always had ideas to improve cleaning and organization, but never had the courage to speak up. After reading your book, I decided to approach my supervisor. To my surprise, she liked my suggestions, and some have already been implemented. Thank you for teaching me that my opinion matters. See, Margaret, William said when she showed him the letter, your courage is inspiring others to be courageous too. It's the greatest reward I could ask for, Mr. William. 2 years after the book's release, Parker Textile Industries had become a national benchmark for humane management. They regularly hosted students, business leaders, and researchers eager to learn their methods. The Phoenix Project had evolved into a full line of innovative products. The company now exported to 12 countries and had opened 2 new facilities in the United States. But what made William proudest was the work environment. The company had impressive employee satisfaction rates, low turnover, and high productivity. Margaret, he said during a board meeting, our HR metrics are enviable. How do you explain this success? It's simple, Mr. William. When people feel valued, they value their work. When they feel heard, they contribute. When they feel part of something bigger, they give their best. And what's the secret to making people feel that way? There's no secret. Just treat everyone with dignity and respect. Recognize that every employee has valuable knowledge. It's about creating spaces where people can contribute beyond their basic roles. Jennifer added, and it's important to have leaders who lead by example. Mr. William completely changed his way of interacting with employees. That made all the difference. William smiled. You taught me that being a leader isn't about giving orders. It's about serving people, creating conditions for them to succeed. At that moment, the secretary entered the room. Mr. William, there's a call from the Global Business Daily in New York. They want to do a story on American companies with innovative management. William looked at Margaret and Jennifer. Should we accept the interview? Of course, said Margaret. Our story needs to be told to the whole world. The international interview became another milestone in the company's journey. The article highlighted how an American family business had managed to grow and innovate while maintaining humanized values, and how a housekeeper had become the symbol of this transformation. Margaret, William said after reading the published piece, do you realize your story is inspiring people all over the world? Sometimes I still can't believe everything that's happened, Mr. William. And what impresses you most about this journey? What impresses me most is discovering I had abilities I didn't even know existed. For years, I saw myself only as a housekeeper. Now I know I'm much more than that. You always were much more than that, Margaret. I was the one who was blind not to see it. But what matters is that now we see, and we can help others see too. William stood up and walked to the window overlooking the factory courtyard. Below, hundreds of employees worked with dedication and satisfaction. Margaret, when I look at our company today, I see much more than a successful textile industry. I see a family that learned to value every member, a community growing together. And you also see that it's worth fighting for our values, Mr. William, that we don't have to settle for what's easiest or most profitable in the short term. Exactly. We've proven it's possible to do business ethically and humanely, that it's possible to grow without stepping on anyone. Jennifer joined them at the window. Mom, do you realize you've changed not just your life, but the lives of hundreds of people? It wasn't just me, dear. It was everyone who believed in change, who bet on a different way of doing things. But you were the catalyst, said William. You were the one who had the courage to speak when everyone else was silent. And you had the courage to listen when it would have been easier to ignore me, Margaret replied. Just then, Walter from maintenance, the company's longest-serving employee, entered the office. Mr. William, can I have a quick word? Of course, Walter. What is it? I wanted to thank you, sir. My grandson just graduated with an engineering degree thanks to the scholarship the company gave him. He'll start working here next week. William smiled, moved. Congratulations, Walter. Your family has always been part of our family. That's why I wanted to thank you. I never imagined I'd one day have a grandson working as an engineer at the same company where I started as a general helper. After Walter left, Margaret remarked, "That's the true measure of our success, Mr. William. Not profit or growth. It's the chance to transform lives, create opportunities, and make a difference in families' stories." Margaret, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Are you happy now? Truly happy? Margaret smiled tenderly. Mr. William, I've always been happy working here. But now I'm happy in a different way. Now I know my life had purpose, that my choices made a difference, that my story can inspire others. And what are your dreams for the future? I want to keep learning, growing, and contributing. I want to see our company continue to be an example of how it's possible to do business with heart. And I want to see my daughter build her own success story. William looked at the two women who had transformed not only his company, but also his own vision of leadership and human relationships. Margaret, Jennifer, you know there aren't enough words to thank you for everything you've done, don't you? No need to thank us, Mr. William, said Margaret. We did it together, and we'll keep doing it together. Forever, Jennifer confirmed. William smiled, knowing he had found not just capable employees, but lifelong partners in building a legacy that went far beyond business. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this inspiring story about courage, recognition, and overcoming challenges. Do you know someone who, like Margaret, deserved more recognition at work? Share your honest thoughts about this transformation in the comments.